Hello and welcome to the Southern Star's Coronavirus Podcast. I'm the news editor, Siobhan Cronin.
And I'm Southern Star Creative Manager, Niall O'Driscoll.
And each week on our podcast, we talk to people working through the pandemic in West Cork and beyond. We also take a look at that week's Southern Star and how our journalists throughout West Cork are covering the crisis and some other news too. Later in this week's podcast, I will be talking to actress and author Carol Drinkwater. Most recognisable as Helen Herriott in that iconic TV series All Creatures Great and Small, these days Carol is a best-selling author and lives in the south of France. She'd normally be a regular visitor to Bantry this time of year for the West Cork Literary Festival, so we will have a chat with her about her fantastic career and her life in France after lockdown in a little while. But first, now take a look at this week's newspaper. We're going to have a look at page 1, and we have two COVID-related stories back on the front page again this week. Starting off with a warning from the Gardaí.
Yeah, the lead story this week, Siobhan, is, as you say, it's a warning from Chief Superintendent Con Cadigan about people, but young people particularly, putting out messages about events that they're having or whatever on social media, because there was a case in Bandon recently where a young girl put out a message about a birthday party, and there was young people from all over the county that she didn't even know converged on Bandon to try and attend the party. They hired buses, they made their way there, they congregated. I think there was about 80 in total. They managed to hire buses. They came from as far afield as Middleton and Ballincollig, and I mean ultimately the guards were called to disperse them, and it just got out of hand, really, you know.
Yeah, I think there was a similar one in Dublin that really hit the headlines last week or the week before in Lucan, and so this actually happened. Something very, very similar happened in West Cork. So I think he's just saying, don't put your party invites on social media. Is the takeaway from that.
Sure, and it kind of ties in slightly with another story on the front cover then, which is as we probably all heard about the GA clubs that had to close in West Cork recently, and a warning from the Carbery chairman, Tommy Lyons. And his message was, yes, that players would have to be careful in terms of playing matches and on the field, but he also made the point that it's not even so much on the pitch, but in their social lives they need to be careful, because if they are going out socialising and then they're coming back playing games and congregating and playing matches and stuff, that's where the possibility of spreading the bug is. So that's a very important note from both the Chief Super, Con Cadigan, and Tommy Lyons with the Carbery GA, in terms of just having a bit of cop on, a bit of sense when it comes to the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also cover inside. I think there was talk of other house parties in Beara and outside Bantry and that, where there are fears now that there may have been some cases brought into the area. And of course, we have been pretty good up to a point in West Cork, so we don't want to see those figures rising now if we can at all.
I think the word today, like from the government, is that like house parties can't. Well, they were never supposed to happen anyway, but they're limiting them strictly to 10 people, and from not more than 4 other households, I think, is the
right,
situation.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a situation countrywide with regard to house parties, probably with pubs closed and things, which just needs to be addressed.
Yeah. But there was a lovely, I suppose, a divergence from all the COVID negativity and bad news this week, when there was a story of a mystery buyer buying an island off West Cork. But there was even yet in that, there was a COVID link in that he or she never got to see the property whatsoever, because they saw it on WhatsApp. So it's lovely to think that you can have 5.5 million to spend on something that you've never even seen face to face.
I was looking at it, and to be honest, it's 5.5 million seems like a lot of money, but it's not a bad bargain when you look at it. It's an island, but it's got a main house and I think 6 ancillary cottages, and obviously it's on a lot of land. Stunning West Cork views in the middle of Roaring Water Bay. I mean, it's probably money well spent if you have it, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because I think you were saying that even CNN are covering this now, and
that's right.
A lot of people do want to get away from big areas of population. There's been a bit of a lifestyle change by a lot of people, and I suppose if you're in that category of person that does have that kind of money to spend, why not buy an island in the west of Ireland and know that you're going to be, once you get on that island, you're going to be safe for sure. I don't think there are any cases of COVID known on Horse Island at the moment.
It's remote working in every sense of the word, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So it is a stunning property, like you say. The main house is absolutely gorgeous. It's been modernized. It's got all sorts of bells and whistles, you'd say, and beautiful little ancillary properties around the place. Gorgeous decking. There's tennis courts. There's a gym. There's a little boat that's called a play boat on one of the shores of one of the beaches. Beautiful sandy beaches. A helipad. You know, what more could you want? But if you want to see the pictures, we have a spread inside and property of some of the pictures of the house, and also there's a lovely house for sale at a slightly more reasonable, over 400,000 in Inchydoney, if that's more in your price bracket, in our property section this week. So as well as that, we also are covering, of course, the breaking news this week that the phase 4 has been pushed out another few weeks, and the publicans are quite annoyed about that. So we have a story from Kieran O'Mahony on page 3 about the publicans reacting, and also a story from Clonakilty Hospital. Now, there was a report in one of the national papers last week that some COVID patients had been accommodated with some non-COVID patients in Clonakilty Hospital, but the HSE has denied that this week now and said that they had instigated what they called cohorting at the hospital, which means they do segregate patients who have COVID. So we're covering that story as well. And also we got Emma Connolly and Kieran O'Mahony went out and about this week, because it's a week since the original pubs were allowed open, as in the pub serving food, and the hairdressers are back in action. So a week on, the two of them went out. Kieran did volunteered to do a trip of the pubs in Clonakilty, and Emma volunteered to get her hair done. So they're just reporting back on what they found as regards PPE, and Kieran had a great chat with the customers about getting out of lockdown and into the pubs and having a meal, and that's reported in a nice page feature inside as well.
I think the big takeout from that really is at least what the publicans and the hairdressers and things are reporting is just the sheer joy of their customers at being able to get out and do these what would ordinarily be everyday things. It's just that sheer joy of being able to go and get your hair cut or get your hair done or have a pint or whatever in relatively normal conditions.
And see other human beings
exactly, yeah,
at the same time. Yeah. We also inside have some other features this week. We have a lovely feature on Dr. Dorothy Stopford, and she was called Cork's Rebel Doctor. She helped some of the flying columns during the Civil War and the War of Independence in the West Cork area. And she was also involved in bringing in some vaccines for children and had even done autopsies on Spanish flu victims to learn more about vaccines. So it's just a very timely piece this week. So a nice story on her. And also, would you believe it's 35 years since the statue moved in Banspittle? Wow. So we've gone back to Banspittle this week to talk to some of the people there about their memories of that. I couldn't believe that 20,000 people were in Banspittle one night in August 35 years ago. Can you imagine 20,000 people?
I could well have been one of them. I think I remember being taken down there with my parents and my brother and my grandmother in particular, who wanted to go down there and see it.
And did you get a Metro burger?
I have no recollection of getting a burger, no. Although I believe there's quite a brisk trade in burgers being done there, all right. But
absolutely, yes. The famous Grotto burger, I think, first began in Banspittle.
That's right. It was quite a phenomenon. That I mean, I was only talking to somebody the other day about it. The feeling in the air down there. I mean, whether you believe whatever happened, that it moved or didn't or otherwise, even as a young kid, there was this palpable sense of something happening, or this. As I say, it was in the air down there. It was quite remarkable, and to this day, I remember this feeling. It was amazing, you know, and.
Yeah, we have lovely stories. There were one of the families, when our photographer visited last week, he met a family down there who the mum and dad had been there 35 years ago, and they were explaining how they had brought their cousin at the time, who was an officer in the NYPD,
Right.
and he was sure that it moved, and he wanted to get up and investigate. Was there any way anyone could be manipulating it from behind? But of course, with the crowds, it's impossible to get there. With battling your way through 20,000 people who probably wouldn't want you to show that it was being moved by strings.
They just wouldn't want you interfering with it one way or the other, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, of course, it was attacked by a Christian faith group, I think, and there was a court case. So that's all covered in it. So it's just worth remembering. And we also have a nice feature in the community section this week. Rachel McCarthy from Ballinalee has set up a page called The Humans of West Cork. Now, a lot of people will be familiar with The Humans of New York, I think was the original page. I think there's also a Humans of Dublin page now. And it's just basically lovely photographic portraits of people going about their day's work or their regular walks or whatever. And she's got some nice pictures there, which we're reprinting this week.
I think the gist is the extraordinary, ordinary people, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And there's some lovely portraits there. That's the front of the community section. And Emma Connolly is continuing her demented home workers column this week, and I think she's switched her attentions from Tony Holohan to Professor Luke O'Neill is now the object of her affection, and she's also talking about really craving for the bright lights of a city, any city at this stage, and someone stealing her spot on the beach as well, which of course is a hanging offence in West Cork to a local.
Yeah. She's having a little go at the kind of what she's describing as the overuse of the term staycation at this stage as well, because she said, in one sense, if you are actually trying to rent a property or go somewhere to stay at home, that it's almost not possible to do it. I mean, staycation is almost actually staying at home and probably travelling out from there. That you really, even if you wanted to go somewhere in Kerry or wherever, you can't get a place to rent. So she's just a bit.
She can be miffed all she likes, but I'm sure there's probably people listening to this podcast in the likes of Longford and Offaly who would be just loving to be within 3 or 4 miles of a white sandy beach.
Fair
enough. I think Emma needs to remember she doesn't have it too bad after all.
Yeah, get some perspective, Emma.
Exactly, yeah. So Niall, you also want to talk to us about a great free magazine that is available in the paper this week.
Yeah, it's. I have a copy of it here. I'm just gonna. It's our Support West Cork Shop Local magazine. It's part of a 3-month-long campaign that we're running to do exactly that, to support West Cork, encourage people to shop local, and it's a 72-page magazine, Siobhan, which is the biggest we've ever produced in terms of an in-paper magazine. So it's a first for ourselves, and it covers. I mean, it goes right through from retail, tourism, leisure, food, hotels, even things like financial and legal services in West Cork. And it also includes over 30 pages of things to see and do in the area for people who are, as we said, on a staycation in the area. They've come from somewhere else and they want to see what can they do, what's available under the present conditions. But it's also a nice reminder to people in the locality themselves that we have this amazing resource just here. I mean, you literally only have to go 10 miles this way or 20 miles that way within West Cork to go and see and do some of these amazing things. So we're very proud of it. It's out today, and it's in the papers. Again, just with that idea of supporting West Cork, keeping it local. The multiplier effect, as they say. You spend €1 in an area, and what it does in terms of coming back to suppliers, wages, that money getting, local families and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's maps in it as well. Niall, it's good area maps.
There's a map. There's a map of the Greater West Cork area, and there's the results of our poll about West Cork's favourite beaches, and all of those beaches are indicated on the map and things as well.
Can you give us a bit of a preview of what may have topped the poll? You have to buy it and find out.
You have to buy it and find out, I think. Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of surprises there, actually, to be honest about it. Okay. But I think let people buy the paper, have a look, find out themselves, and they can get back to us if they don't like the results. But it was a public poll, so.
Democracy rules.
Democracy rules, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Niall. And don't forget, if you can't get to the shops, you can subscribe online by going to southernstar.ie and clicking on the e-paper tab. or call the office on 028 21200 for a postal copy to be sent out to you. Carol Drinkwater is an instantly recognisable face to any fans of TV in the 70s, 80s and even 90s. And she was the wonderfully fun but strong-willed vet's wife Helen Herriott in the iconic TV series All Creatures Great and Small. These days, Carol is better known as a best-selling author of novels and memoirs, and she lives in the south of France, but has been a big fan of the West Cork Literary Festival, which she tells us she is missing this year. So welcome, Carol, and it's lovely to talk to you this afternoon. So can you tell me, how is the south of France today?
It's very hot. It's about 28 degrees. So what is that, about 90 something?
Oh, we work in degrees here. We're with you guys.
Yeah, okay. So 28 degrees. So it's not as hot as it does get sometimes this time of year, but it's pretty hot. I'm in my library and I've got no air conditioning in here, so it's quite stuffy. But that's okay. I'm hidden away from the sun at least. It's very sunny.
Okay, so it's a little
Skibbereen. How's Skibbereen? I love Skibbereen. How is it there?
It's a lovely sunny day in Skibbereen, but it's only about maybe 17 degrees, but that's plenty for me, so I'm happy. So tell me now about the early days of the lockdown. You live in France, and I think France was actually quite strict in the early days, if I remember rightly, when all this hit us around March, April.
You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but you're going. Yes, you've been breaking up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, once the audio is okay, I'd say that's the main thing.
Okay.
So don't worry about the screen so much once you can hear me, because the majority of our listeners will probably hear this on audio anyway. So.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so right. I'll start with that question again. So Carol, tell me about the early days of the lockdown in France. I think France was actually one of the quite strict countries as regards locking down everybody in March or April. Was that right?
We locked down. We were actually up north, just outside. We have a place outside Paris. And March the 15th, we were going to come down about 5 days later. And Michelle came and said to me, get ready, we're leaving in an hour. And we drove until about 2 a.m. to get here for March the 15th. And at midday, we were locked in, we were locked down, and that was our confinement, we call it, right through until mid-May. I've only now been out maybe 4 times since February, other than the journey down, and that we went back up again to see everything was okay after everything opened up. But I've barely been off the property, and we wear masks all the time, obviously not at home, but masks are obligatory here. They're going to be obligatory indoors, except in private houses as of August. If we went out, we had to carry a document with us to say where we were going. We couldn't be out for more than an hour. Couldn't be in anybody's company, not even someone that we were living with. It was a one solitary outing with a document to say that we had a reason to go out, like to the pharmacy or to get food, and they were the only reasons. So they've been very strict. I looked this morning on the WHO site, which I've been following every day, and we have no new cases and no new deaths yesterday. I mean, Ireland is doing pretty amazingly. I know, because I follow the news every day in Ireland, and I think you beat yourselves up a little bit, because I actually think you're doing amazingly over there. I mean, better than you seem to think you are.
Well, I think we're doing okay, but there is a bit of a kickback now because we were to move to the next phase this week, and we're not allowed to move to our next phase now because our cases are slightly increasing again.
Higher than expected. I saw that they're not going to open up the pubs. You're not opening up the pubs as was expected, yeah? So that's, that must be a blow. I can see that would be a blow. But listen, I think we've got to do it, and that's it. And we just got to face that this year is about getting through this and finding, until we have a vaccine, we've all just got to be, sensible and think of everybody, not just ourselves.
Absolutely. So take me back in time now to the 70s when you got the role of Helen Herriott in All Creatures Great and Small. And Helen came across as a witty, warm, but very strong-willed vet's wife. And I think a lot of people would wonder how much of Carol was in Helen.
Very little of Carol is in Helen. I would have had Helen be stronger and more independent to fit in with my own way of seeing the world. The real Helen, Joan White, Alf White's wife, that the role was sort of based on, she was stronger than the character in the books. The character in the books is a little bit, I always used to say rehearsing, well, I'll just reheat that tea bag, James, you know, because it was constantly, oh, would you like a cup of tea, dear? And I felt that they could have done more with the role, and that's finally why I left it, because I said, if you don't give me a bicycle and get me in with the Red Cross or out there or looking after women who are on the streets or single mothers, or give us something to do that actually is socially, contributive. But they didn't want to do that. They said it's not in the book. So in the end, I said, okay, well, I think I've given it all I can. It's been a great role, but, you know, there wasn't a great deal more I could give it after that, you know.
Right.
I was sad to leave it.
Well, I think you'll always be Helen Herriott in many people's eyes, just from a generational point of view. In my mind, that's how I always remember you. I suppose I just grew up with that series and I loved it so much. But you were also in A Clockwork Orange, which I think a lot of people don't realise.
My first job at the drama school.
Yes.
Chalky, yes.
Chalky, Casualty, Peak Practice, and The Sweeney. So you had a very colourful, very varied career of very different characters there. And at what stage in your career did you decide to make the shift to writing then? Was it because of some of the script writers you'd encountered? Maybe
No, not at all. I've been writing since I was about 8. I've always, I knew I'd be an actress and I dreamed of being a writer. And once I met Michel, my husband, the man who's now my husband, I was filming in Australia and he was the executive producer on a children's miniseries I was making called Golden Pennies. And he asked me to marry him on our first date out. We had a drink at the hotel and then the next evening we went out for dinner. And he asked me to marry him before even the first course had been served. So it was all a kind of mad, crazy
a man who knows his own mind.
Who knows his own mind, still does. And he said, you know, because he said, is there something you haven't done? And I said, well, I'd like to get published. You know, I've been published in magazines, but I mean, writing books. So he said, look, I'll really fight behind you and get you doing it. So the next role I was doing as an actress, I spent all my spare time on location writing. And that became my first book called The Haunted School, which was a children's book. And we made it into a television series in Australia, and I played the main role. Michelle produced it, and Disney picked it up in the States, and it won the Chicago Film Festival Gold Award for children's films. And so that got me sort of launched. It sold in England, it sold about 168,000 copies, which compared to Harry Potter sounds like nothing now. But we're talking pre-Harry Potter, when children's literature and children's television was not considered anything. It was kind of second-rate stuff. You know, if you were in the children's department, you hadn't made it to the adult sort of mentality, which I always disagreed with. And I was very pleased when the book did so well, and it certainly got me launched, and I got a contract with Penguin after that. So here I am, still with Penguin, back with Penguin, in fact.
That kicked you off then. And just going back to your time as an actress, I read a piece you wrote for the Daily Mail a few years ago where you talked about a very devastating time in your life where you were sexually assaulted by a film director. And I think you felt that the Me Too movement allowed you that space to come out and talk about it again. And even in the last 2 years, quite a lot has happened. We've seen the jailing of Harvey Weinstein. We've seen a lot of women coming forward about Jeffrey Epstein. So do you feel the environment now, maybe for young actresses, is a better place than in the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s and the 90s?
First, just let me say a little bit about what happened to me. It utterly traumatized me. It happened in my mid-20s. I think I was 25 or 26. It was just before All Creatures. The man was Elie Kazan, one of the greatest film directors, of the 20th century, a god to me. And he behaved appallingly. It was not just a one-off occasion. We were rehearsing together for a fortnight. It went on and on and on every day. And even on the day of the screen test, his behavior was abominable. But I was confused, thinking, is this someone who's trying to get, he kept saying, I want to see the passion in you, and all that stuff, which now I would kind of go, I'd say something very rude. So I was immature enough not to understand actually that this was a full-on attempt at trying to rape, seduce me, whatever you want to call it. I buried it for a very long time. I tried to write about it, then couldn't. Then I wrote a book called The Lost Girl, in which I talked about it, a young actress after the Second World War who is actually raped. I wasn't raped by him because I didn't let that happen, but a young girl of 17 who is actually raped in the book. And it was at the West Cork Literary Festival, which is where I should be this week, if all things had been normal, where I was interviewed, and I was talking about The Lost Girl, and it was there that the lady who was interviewing me, whose name doesn't come to mind immediately, a lovely lady, she asked me about it, and I said that it was based on a real episode. And it was from them, it was before the Me Too movement by about 3 months, I'd say. So I was a little bit ahead of, not that I did it for that reason, I just needed to get it out, and this book seemed the perfect place to put it. And once I had written about it and the book got published, I realized that it was such a big thing that I had been carrying. I mean, a real iceberg inside me. And so talking about it in Bantry was the beginning. It was like the first step. And then I talked to The Guardian, and then I wrote the piece for the Mail, the Saturday essay for the English Mail, Daily Mail. And I wasn't going to say who he was. And then the lady from The Guardian said to me, I really think, name him and shame him. So I did. And it has been such a release for me to talk about it, to open up about it, to admit that it has made it has stained my career and my life. There is no question about it. I'm not saying that I would have been more of this or less of this, but it has definitely been something that I have carried with me for decades. So I think what's important for young actresses now, and boys, by the way, this is not just exclusively a girl thing, is that they have the opportunity to see that there are some of us who have been there, been through such an experience, such a very painful and demoralizing experience, because I thought for years that it was my fault, which is, it's always the thing. Often people that get beaten think that in some way, that, domestic abuse, that in some way they deserve it. And this is something that's so important to make those who are victims understand it has nothing to do with them. Maybe I could have been stronger with him, but I was as strong as I was able to be, and I comprehended at that stage. And so I sincerely hope that it offers any young girls or young boys, or even not so young, the opportunity to see that it has nothing to do with them, that it is some lech or, opportunist or rich producer, the Weinstein figures, who are taking advantage of their position and compromising people who want to work. I wanted to work. I wanted the job to work. I wanted to go to Hollywood and play the role. I was devastated when it wasn't given to me. And I assumed it was because I hadn't slept with him, and that if I'd slept with him, would he have given it to me? I wouldn't have slept with him even so for that. So it's a very big issue, and it's something that matters deeply to me, even now. And I sincerely hope that the fact that because it did take me 30 years at least to come out, that there are some young people who have read either the book, the novel, The Lost Girl, which is a novel, but still that is based on some fact, or my articles, that they will be able to say to themselves, I won't let this happen to me. Or if it does happen to me, I know enough now to say, this isn't my fault. It's got nothing to do with me. It's this person, male or female, because it isn't necessarily a heterosexual thing. It happens with lots of gay people as well. And sometimes it's worse for them because they have the added thing of, do I want people to know, or all the other stuff that they might be dealing with, that it has nothing to do with them, and that these are people taking advantage of their position and they should be locked away or whatever it happens to be. Sorry if that's so strong. Or
No. Absolutely, it's very important. And then I wondered if then that you said it had a massive effect on you, and it's something you carried with you. Do you ever think that subconsciously you moved into a career which was very much puts you in control? You know, it's very much working alone. You're not at the behest of, you know, powerful men holding roles over you. As a writer, you have a lot more power and control.
Independence and universe, it's my universe. In to some extent, of course, my editors and everyone come on board too. I certainly think it has something to do with it. I mean, it certainly made me much more of a recluse than I was before. As a young actress, I definitely wanted to go to Hollywood. I had strong ambitions of what I wanted to do. And I very much wanted to work in the world of film. Like Kazan said that he did that. This is perhaps the worst part of it for me. It's not that he did it because he wanted my body, not that I wanted him to want my body, but he said afterwards, I wanted to prove that she didn't have the sang-froid for Hollywood. And I think that's probably the most demeaning. I mean, I also think it's not true. I think it's just he was a rotten old lech who did his best to conquer, as he saw it, he slept with Marilyn Monroe. You know, I mean, if you read his autobiography, you will see what a nasty piece of work he was, as well as a brilliant director. He was a brilliant director.
But didn't he want
bully actresses and hurt them and demean them?
What I took from your writing, Carol, was that he wanted somebody else in that role, and he wanted to basically make a case for them by saying that you weren't up to it. Manipulate, and then making you so upset that you performed very badly when you needed to be on.
That's exactly right. He kept, throughout the screen test, he kept coming up beside me, sidling up beside me, and whispering in my ear, I want to you.
That's not the link breaking down. That's you not saying the word.
I'm not saying the word F-U-C-K,
exactly,
because I don't want to offend any listeners, you know.
But that's what he was saying in your ear when you were trying to.
That's what he was saying. I want to F you. And he was doing it like every half an hour, and or even more than that. Every time there was a break, and Harold Pinter was reading in for Robert De Niro, who I knew and was looking forward to working with, and Harold was reading in. And Harold went across it because Harold and I had worked together on this script for 6 months or something. I don't mean I'd helped him write it, but we worked on how to, you know, they would like me to play the role and blah blah blah. It seemed pretty much a given that I was going to be offered the role. And then Harold just crossed the set, the screen, you know, in kind of the studios or whichever studios it was. Confused, and I tried to go across to him to say what was there, and Kazan grabbed me and called me back and said, get back on your king, using the same word again, spot, and don't you move. So he made it impossible for me to in any way
get help.
Get help or in any way. I mean, aside from shouting at him and making a scene, which today I probably would do because I'm an old bat and I don't actually care now. If somebody treats me that badly, I would damn well say so. But you know, at 25, 26, when this is your big Hollywood break, and you don't even necessarily know why he's doing it. I didn't know then that there was somebody else he wanted to play the role. I was terribly confused and cowed by it. And so after it all fell apart, and Sam Spiegel, who was producing it, didn't give me another screen test when I explained what happened. And it was then he said that Kazan had said to him, oh, I don't think she's got the sang-froid for Hollywood. In fact, he wanted this other actress. I think I lost so much faith in I didn't know what to believe anymore. I didn't know what the life buoys were that I should be holding. Everything that I believe and hold true, and you know, with my lovely Irish mum background and all of that stuff was just blown out of the water. These people seemed to me to be lying. They seemed to be twisted. I didn't know what to believe. And then I got offered All Creatures, and I said to my agent, oh, look, I really want to go for films. And he said to me, if you don't do this, I really won't represent you. He's just died during COVID, but Ken McCready, wonderful man. And he said, he was the only person I told about this. And he said, I really want you to do this role. It will help you heal, and we can build from this. It'll be a different kind of building, but we can build from this. And so I trusted him, and that was the way I went forward. And slowly I was able to build a career, which became very successful. But I always carried this pain inside myself, that in some way that I had let myself down, and I had failed myself because I hadn't done what was wanted to be part of Hollywood, which is a terrible weight to carry around with you when you're a young actress, you know. In some way, I believed I didn't have what it took to actually be first class, top ranking, famous, a star. Do you know what I mean? All those things. And of course, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. He was a twisted old bastard.
But I mean, that is also why you were targeted, because as a young woman trying to make your way in the world, that's a vulnerability. And, you know,
absolutely. And I was incredibly, 25 then is not the same probably as 25 now. We didn't have social media. I didn't talk about this to anybody. You know, I buried it inside myself, and I cried myself to sleep a lot. And, you know, and it was 30 years before I talked about it, except to my agent, as I say. And then really the first time I talked about it, apart from writing about it, was at the West Cork Literary Festival. And I hadn't intended to. It just came up in our dialogue and our conversation, and out it came. I said, well, actually, it's based on something real, and out came the story. I had no intention to divulge that as the reality. And once it was out, once we started talking about it, then I realized that I'd been carrying something that was very heavy for a very long time.
And Carol, you mentioned there in passing your Irish mother, and even though you might beat yourself up about it now that you didn't confront him, you know, you almost let it happen, there probably is an Irishness in you. We're great at sweeping things under the carpet and just getting on with it.
Absolutely. That, and also the kind of the Catholic thing of, maybe in some way I am to blame, you know, the Catholic guilt thing that one carries, you know, we carry from birth, as it were. Some of that too was definitely in there. And I wouldn't have told my mum, because I think that it would have upset her terribly. I think she was in Bantry, I'm pretty sure. Was she in Bantry? I know she died. She died just before The Lost Girl was published, because she was part of the reason I wrote. Wasn't there when I had that, but I never told her about it, because I just didn't think it was something to tell my mum, you know.
And are you very like your mother, do you think?
Very like my mother. We were like sisters. I miss her terribly, and I'm missing her this week particularly because we'd have been, when I wasn't, if I'm not in West Cork Lit Fest, we'd have been off to Woody Island to have fish and chips and on the beach and have a glass of wine and talk about our lives. And, so this is very particularly difficult. And also her birthday's coming up. So July is a tough time for me in terms of my mum.
Was she from the Midlands, Carol? Was she?
Mm-hmm.
The Irish Midlands, your mother, Phyllis, was it?
We're from County Laois. Laois. Coleraine in County Laois. My family is still there. The farm is still in the family. My cousins have it. And my lovely cousin Mari has a house on my cousin Mari has a house there, and my cousin John, her brother, has also another house there. So the land has been divided up a little bit, and it's not run in the same kind of farm as it was when my grandparents were there, but it's still there, and it's still the family farm, and it's just lovely to go back, and all the areas.
And you mentioned there West Cork. You should be here at the moment, or if the festival was on, you would be.
It would have been the West Cork Lit Fest this week.
That's right. And when you are here, how do you find the comparisons with the south of France now? I mean, you seem to like it a lot here, but we would say, my gosh, why would you leave the south of France to come to Ireland's weather?
Well, the weather is the weather is a big factor for me, but I've been here so long now that maybe the sun and those kind of things are slightly less important than they used to be. But I mean, I'm married here, so you know, my life is here in that sense. However, though I was educated in England at an Irish convent, I've never thought of myself as I do. My father had English, had some English blood. He was English Irish. My mother was completely Irish. So I've always thought of myself as Irish, and my passport is Irish. So I always think that, God forbid, I don't like to think of this scenario, but should something happen to Michelle, should there be a reason why I wasn't here anymore, I definitely would return to Ireland. There are all kinds of spots in Ireland. I think if the day comes, might be a place where I might find myself a little home, you know. I do miss it very much. I mean, I miss it viscerally, you know. There's a lot of things about Ireland that I miss, just little things, details that you can't necessarily relate to or mean anything in particular, a lilt of an accent or whatever it happens to be, or a particular kind of laughter, the sense of humour. There are lots of things I miss about Ireland when I'm not there. And this is the longest I've ever not been there. I haven't been there since last, I think November last year. So this is the longest I've ever been away.
Right. But you do live in a spectacular part of the south of France near Cannes, I think. And
we overlook the Bay of Cannes.
Wow. And tell me how much that location influences your books, because I know quite a lot of them are set in Paris or the coast of France. I think especially the House on the Cliff, am I right?
The House on the Edge of the Cliff was set near Marseille. That's my most recent one, which would have been talking about this week. That's set in the Calanque area near Marseille. And I wrote a piece, I think, for the Irish Times about that last year when it was first published, about that area of France, which is not quite as well known as Cannes. I try to pick little pockets of places down here that mean something to me and might not be exactly, because, you know, Cannes, people know Cannes. And I do include Cannes in the film festival. The book I'm just starting now has, if that's how it stays, has the film festival in the background at the beginning of it. And I do sometimes include that, but I do also like to look for little pockets where people might say, oh, I don't know that part. Why don't I read this, or why don't I visit that? So the Calanque is one, and the book I've just finished is set inland of here in the area called the Mercantour Park, which is a beautiful national park, which is partly Italian, because the border of the two countries go through the Mercantour Park. So there's lots of wildlife and climbing and mountains. It's the Lower Alps. So my new novel, the novel that I finished, just finished now, is set there during the Second World War.
And do you do a lot of research?
So,
do you travel?
Brilliant.
Sorry, Carol, do you travel to the areas?
I love the research. Yeah. I do. I travel to the areas. As it happens, these are not long distance areas. I can be at the Mercantour in an hour, and the Calanque, where the House on the Edge of the Cliff is set, it's an hour and a half from here. And we would go and stay over and do some of the walks and that sort of thing. So that I really got to be, the house on the edge of the cliff, the actual house is an invented house, but the area of the Calanques, the creeks, it's all creek area. It's very beautiful, really beautiful. Quite wild, and lots of wonderful walks and things in forest land, and then these beaches. We'd go there and stay overnight a day or two when I was writing the book, so that we could enjoy the scenery in the area, and it was a good excuse for me to, you know, and I could sit and be inspired by it as well.
And can you tell me a little bit about the book you're writing at the moment, then? The one with the Cannes Film Festival in the background.
Oh, I've literally just, because the book that which hasn't got a title yet, which comes out next April. I called it an illicit act of love, and my editor says that's too saucy a title, so she doesn't want that. So we're debating a title at the moment. That's set, as I said, at the inland at this national park in 1943. A very particular incident happened there during the Second World War, and that's been the inspiration for that book. So that's the story of a young 17-year-old girl and her time during the Second World War, and then what happened to her after that. So I've loved writing that, and I know my editor is very excited about that one. The new one, well, it's too soon really. I'm only 2 or 3 weeks into it, so anything could happen. I'm at that stage where what Iris Murdoch says, you open the door and the landscape is grey and misty. You know there's wind and you know there's air out there, but you don't quite know yet what's going to happen. It starts, and I've no idea if this has got something to do with COVID or not. It starts in on the front of a beach resort, which could be Cannes, I don't know yet. Probably Cannes or near Cannes, out of season, in a very, very kind of what seems like dead location. And this woman comes back because she's had a phone call from her lawyer to say that there's been squatters at her house. And then I'm not going to say any more because I don't really know too much more yet. I mean, I have ideas of where it's going, but no.
Do you plot out your books on paper before you sit down,
No.
or do you just let it happen? No. Let the characters take
I more or less let it happen. I mean, if it's a historical book like the one I just finished is, then obviously I do masses of research for the historical aspect of it, and then I let the character wander her way through, the main character wander her way through the historical roots of the piece, and I look to see what she, a bit like a pinball game, see what she bounces off and comes back and where it's taking her as she goes along. Some of it I use, some of it I don't. This new book, it's about memory, I think. It's about memory and a relationship that goes off the wall, that absolutely goes, how she remembers something that in fact, and whether or not it really happened that way. That's sort of where it's going, I think, at the moment.
Okay.
But ask me in a year. Let's have this chat in a year and see what I say then.
Well, hopefully it'll be at the Literary Festival this time next year. We'll be having the chat.
Well, I'm hoping they'll have the one, the set in the Mercantile. I hope I can come and talk to Emir and everybody there next year. Yes,
absolutely. And just before we finish, Carol, I think fans of writers always like to know what the writer is reading themselves, watching, or even, I don't know, do you listen to podcasts? But what have you been doing during the lockdown? Or are you like some of us and don't have any time? Right.
I have plenty of time. I do. No, I read all the time. I've been reading Patrick Modiano, who's a French writer who won the Nobel Prize in 2014. I don't know how well known he is in Ireland. He's one writer I've been reading recently. I've been reading the new Isabel Allende, which was set. It begins during the Spanish Civil War and then takes a couple on a journey to South America, which is, I love her writing. I love the poetry of her writing, and I love the sense of expanse of her writing. I mean, she takes big subjects, and I like that. What else have I been reading? Gosh, I went back to some Scott Fitzgerald last week. I mean, I dip in and out of a lot of books as well, but I'm constantly reading. I can't remember. A Simon Moore, which I'd read before, which I dipped into the other day as well. So it's like that as well.
And are you watching anything? Are you watching? There's a series just started on the BBC, Mrs. America, which kind of I thought would be right up your street. You haven't picked up on that over there, have you?
I don't think I can get the BBC over here. I do watch Netflix sometimes, but I'm not sure I can get the BBC over here. I think I've tried a few times to do BBC iPlayer and also BFI. I joined the BFI so I could watch a lot there because they have such wonderful films. But I buy a film and then I can watch like 10 minutes and then it gets blocked. So I'm not quite sure. There must be one of those things that people have ways round this, and I haven't sorted that out yet. So maybe I have to do that at some point.
Okay, well listen, Carol, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. And like I say, hopefully our next chat will be in Bantry this time next year. And not too socially distanced, I hope.
Well, let's hope we're all through all this time. Healthy and strong and onwards.
And here now we have this week's musical treat. Rachel O'Donovan is a music teacher from Glandore who has been making a name for herself with her lockdown piano versions of dance and pop music favourites, including everyone from Shakira to Harry Styles and Avicii to Nirvana. Her rendition of Tiesto's version of Adagio for strings resulted in a private message from the superstar DJ himself, asking if he could share it with his 5 million followers. But this week, Rachel set herself a new challenge and has recorded a super version of the classic theme to All Creatures Great and Small. To hear more from Rachel, follow @Rachel O'Donovan, that's RACHAEL O'Donovan, one word, on Twitter. Thank you for listening to the Southern Star Coronavirus Podcast. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our podcast, which is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.